Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Thinking About, a series of seminars from Dulwich College and the SSLP. I'm Dr. Phil Q from the college, and tonight's seminar is entitled The Art of Surgery with Sam Gallivan. Our hosts this evening are Samir from Dulwich College and Success from the Charter School North Dulwich. So without further ado, I will pass you over to them to make the introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everybody. I'm really glad you can join us today. I'm really grateful also that Dr. Sam Gallivan is here to talk to us. As Dr. Q said, she'll be talking about the art of surgery. She worked for 7 years as a hand surgeon, and now, currently, she works for the Royal College of Surgeons as the Deputy Academic Lead. Also joining us today, we have many aspiring medics from all of the SSLP schools. So I hope you all enjoy the talk today. And make sure to leave all your questions in the chat, and after the talk, we will answer them. Thank you. Now over to Sam.
Thanks, Samir. That was brilliant. So I am going to share my screen. You have to give me a chance. Here we go. Can everyone see that? Give me a thumbs up if that's all right. Looks good? Perfect. So the talk is called The Art of Surgery, and it kind of is the art of surgery, but to be truthful, it kind of isn't. It's going to make sense where we're going with this. The first thing to say is I am so grateful to come and have the chance to speak to you, because I think in COVID times, we've all felt pretty disconnected from everyone. I would normally go and give loads of talks in schools, and I'm just really sorry that I couldn't be there today, but really, really grateful to have a chance to speak to you. I'm going to pause on this screen just briefly, because we are rethinking surgical practice. It is about art, but also just to explain, if you look at the title on the screen, we've got MBBS, BSc, FRCS, MEd, and maybe that tells you a bit about what I do. So what those are, your MBBS is your primary medical degree. So when you meet surgeons or you meet people who talk to you about their research, it's always worth bearing in mind, we all have the same first degree. You know, you spend 5 or 6 years doing the same undergraduate degree. The FRCS is my fellowship at the Royal College of Surgeons, and that's an exam that you get about 10 or 12 years after qualifying as a doctor. And the MEd was my master's in education. So maybe all the letters tell you a little bit about a journey. So if you meet people and you see this kind of long list of letters, it's always worth thinking about the journey that took them to pick up all those letters. We'll see where we're going with that. So, my slides don't want to go. Now they do. This is, I don't know if anyone recognises this. This is where I work. So this is Imperial College. And Imperial College is in the middle of South Kensington. And there's a beautiful Queen's Tower in the centre, that lovely sort of late Gothic jobby in the middle. And the really, really ugly building off to the left that you kind of see up there, that's my office, right on the top floor. And my job at Imperial increasingly is thinking about medical education, the last bit of the letters after my name. And it might seem a strange way to think about what I do when I'm at work, but it might actually be quite useful to explain what I do, because thinking about what I do at work is a big bit of explaining what I think about education. What do I mean by that? If you're designing a course that you want to teach someone, and that might be undergraduate medicine, so taking people from the age of 18 and turning them into doctors by the age of 24, that's undergraduate medical education. But equally, you've got to design training for people who are now doctors, who are thinking about the subspecialty they want to pursue. So by the time you've got your primary medical qualification, for most people, if they start when they leave school, they're in their early 20s. And then you have to decide, do you want to be a family doctor, a GP? Do you want to be a surgeon, an anaesthetist, a psychiatrist? Do you want to stay in research? And so all of the little strands of medicine, the journeys, the arc that your career might take, they all have to be planned. So the first question we have to answer is, well, you've got to know what you've got to teach. You've got to know what people do. So what do I do all day? That's difficult to explain as well. So if you were to speak to, I think, my family, I reckon they would think, well, I'm a surgical educator, so I do surgery. And the image on the bottom right, and that image was shared with the permission of the patient at whom that photo was taken. So please don't take a photo or screenshot it, but that person very kindly gave consent for their image to be used. So I do operations, and my particular interest is in the hand and wrist. But also I teach, and that's a picture of it's a video from the Royal College of Surgeons, which is of an animal where we're teaching students how to repair tendons. Now, this always, if you were to ask my colleagues what orthopaedic surgeons do all day, they'd probably say that we sit around doing very, very little. So we have a reputation as bone and joint surgeons for being called out of bed in the middle of the night, but actually spending quite a lot of time in downtime, which is difficult to explain. But when you spend a lot of time on call, maybe 30, 40 hours in the hospital, there is an awful lot of time just sat around waiting for things to happen. So it's a very, very intense at some times. Then there's a lot of sitting around. So how do you train people to cope with long periods of time spent at work? How do you train people to deal with uptime and the downtime? It's a difficult question. But truthfully, what I actually spend most of my time doing is I spend most of my time in meetings. So the left-hand side image is where we're planning an operation. That's actually an even higher meeting. We're planning actually what all of us are going to do for 6 months. And then the image on the right is clinic. And, you get an idea of the sort of, it's quite homely, actually. That's taken at St. George's. They're really small rooms. We all hang out in one room together when we're planning our consultations. You can see all the sets of notes up there. You can see how all the sets of notes are one on the other. We leave each other's notices on the board. So actually you see a lot of different environments when you have a job like mine. You have the academic side, you have the teaching side. So it's worth remembering that a career in medicine it can be so many different things, but at the core of it is dealing with people. Because the thing you can't get away from is, apart from me sat watching cricket, there are people in all of these images. And probably your interactions with people are the things that we struggle to teach people the most when we're designing education programs. So actually this question of, how do we know what to teach medical students is also a really live research question. And my supervisor about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, Prof. Kneebone, had the idea that we should think more about the content of what we're teaching people, and we should think more creatively. So he had the idea that we knew we had surgical simulators. We knew that there were machines and there were things that could pretty accurately copy what it was like to be a surgeon in terms of the practical matter. But he started to think, could we rethink to look outside to craft, to art, to computer science? Were there communities of experts who could tell us more about our own work? And I hope you'll see what I mean by this. So I think when you say simulation to most people, this is pretty much what they imagine. So they imagine the flight simulator. They imagine, maybe they've seen clinical simulators. In fact, someone said to me that a couple of months ago that they thought the bottom image looked a bit like Holby City. So there's that sort of sense where it's not quite real, but it is real. So there's a simulation of a medical practice on the lower image. And his insight was that when you simulate anything, if you're simulating being a pilot in the top image with a computer-generated vision of the world, but real handles that you hold, you're translating something that's really in practice, and you're making a fantasy of it. There's an act of translation, but also an act of imagination. So his insight was that if you're building simulators to train people, you don't just want a sort of facsimile, a copy of the real world. You need people who can see what's going on and translate that to make it real. So he had a really good thought experiment. So if you were designing a team to build a simulator of medicine and surgery, who would you want first to recruit to your team? So I'm going to ask you to answer this on a poll, and we'll see a poll hopefully on the screen. So what do I mean by this? So bear in mind, we looked at all the things I do during the day. So I speak to people, I do operations, I do teaching, I kind of sit around. And then we saw some examples of simulators. So like a technical simulator with a computer screen. We also saw one which was a mannequin. So if you were in charge of the team, who are you going to pick first? And it's got, where are we? So you've got to have time to think about it. Also, I don't know is perfectly reasonable. You can hold that in your head. But who would you recruit first? Let's say you had a magical budget. See, these are brilliant. So what have we got? We've had 40 seconds of thinking. What do you guys think? So scientists and engineers, that's really interesting. And they're coming in again. I think we're going to give it to a minute 15 because it's a quick. Who's in the lead? It is scientists, engineers. Then I think like quite substantially, craftspeople are sneaking up, artists and performers, neck and neck. Getting ready to end the poll, get your last ones in. And okay, we're going to end the poll. So I'm going to take that one. Fab. So can I do that? Ooh, no, I can't do that. Can I close that? There we go. So it seems like everyone's first instinct is that they'd like scientists and engineers to build simulators. And, you know, pretty much that's what doctors think as well. So if you were to ask people who don't work in medical education, they're going to say scientists as well and engineers. And there are massive departments of engineering and science of people who make simulators in universities. And at Imperial, we have a really big department that does the same thing. But one of the things we realised was that different aspects of medical practice are probably best simulated by different groups of people. And that's what I mean by this is, for instance, if you had a new robot and you want to train people, train like new surgeons how to use a new robot, it kind of makes sense that you would ask engineers about how you would test that, because it's all quantitative. So it's captured in numbers. You can imagine you'd measure the number of movements that a surgeon makes on the new robot. But let's say you wanted to simulate tying a very delicate stitch. So what I mean is that, especially as you get older, or if you've had a big accident, the technical details of how two blood vessels together, is that really something that a scientist or an engineer could give you information about? You know, I've got unstable internet, cross my fingers, I'm back, I think. You know, is that the best tested by an engineer? If you're tightening a threaded screw into soft bone, would a scientist tell you about that, or maybe a carpenter? Or what if you wanted, people often forget, the surgeons, we do a lot of work with people who are nearing the end of their life. So if you wanted to simulate discussing end of life care, would you ask the engineers to do that? And so that's how our whole idea of how we simulate got broader and got wider. So we have simulation science. At Imperial, we have a lace maker in residence. We have performance scientists who work with musicians and artists. And we also have craftspeople who are associated with our group. So here are some examples, because I think you've got to see the examples of what simulation can look like. And this is, I know I've shown this to so many people, I'm not entirely proud that this is something that I named the haptic bum, and it's now called the haptic bum by a lot of people. And it's an incredibly expensive, very high profile experiment, and I'm not very popular for that. But this is, on your image on the left, is of a traditional simulator. So it's really crude plastic. And what it's simulating is testing the prostate of a person. And so you put your finger in and you feel, if you see the little things next to the things, obviously buttocks, you can put different mechanical things that simulate different conditions. And then the two images on the right are where engineers have mimicked this using haptics. So using small mechanical devices that through physical movement can mimic the feeling of feeling different textures against your finger. And if you look on the screen, you can sort of see where your finger is in a potential space in the simulator. So there are really, really successful engineered simulations out there. Then also the computer scientists have got in on the act. So this is actually from America. This is an Imperial one, but this is a simulated using this is virtual reality, where you see all the steps of an operation and you carry them out in a virtual space. But beyond that, we've pioneered sort of, and I'm doing the later work on something that Roger's working on for about 15, 20 years. And this is Fleur, and Fleur Oaks is the lace maker in residence at Imperial College. So what she does is she works with vascular surgeons who do very, very fine thread management. So they do a lot of work, as I mentioned, stitching together very fragile blood vessels. And when Fleur goes into theatre, she's not allowed to obviously touch patients, and they all consent, and they're all actually often absolutely thrilled to have Fleur in the room. But Fleur brought her artistic sensibility, her eye, her understanding of colour and contrast to make this thing that I just wish I was there with you, because I could bring you the textile body, and I can't because I'm on the screen. But this is her vision, her simulation of what the abdomen, the inside of someone looks like. So this is the skin. You unpeel the top layer. I should say the photo credits for any beautiful photos in my talks are by Dusha Kneebone, who's Prof Kneebone's wife, who's a wonderful photographer. I very much benefit from her pictures. And inside, you have a sort of sense. So this is a close-up, and all of the vessels and the, what do you think that yellow stuff is? You have a sense? Like, to me, it's really obvious. It's just under the skin. It's kind of lumpy, bumpy. The stuff underneath the ropes. She's managed to capture something about colour and contrast. It's not made out of flesh tones. It doesn't look like, it's not photorealistic, but because of her understanding of colour and texture and layers, she's really expressed something quite profound about how we're made up in layers, and about how, in a sense, there's something sort of precious at the bottom. This is what she imagines friable vessels, fragile vessels, to look like little beads, little jewels, and they're hidden. You have to sort of find them. And there is something about that when you're doing abdominal surgery. You're sort of looking for things you need to protect. And this image, this was taken, we do a group of simulations with young people who are interested in careers in healthcare. We do them at the Wellcome Collection in Euston Road. And this is a group of young people who've never seen an operation before, but straight away we give them retractors. That's what that sort of silvery hook is at the front. And we ask them to put their hands in. And just by instinct, they know just how to hold their hands. There's something really interesting about our reaction to the textile body. They know to be gentle. And I've always thought that these two images look very similar. The image on the left is from the Takes and Ives collection. It's actually on show at the moment if you make it down to Cornwall anytime soon. And this is the sculptor. You might know Barbara Hepworth as being a sculptor. She called her sculptural drawings. They are obviously drawings, but they have a sense of scraping. She's scraped against the surface. The works themselves, I think they're about, I'm going to get it wrong, in sort of push over 30 of them, extraordinary studies of operations in the 1940s. There's something really, they're beautiful. They speak very clearly. When I first saw these, I just immediately found them resonant of my experience of surgery. And they are also capturing that moment at the beginning of the NHS. And there's something about, people often say that she's painted people like angels, but there is something about a higher purpose. They're a really extraordinary set. And if you're interested in where art and surgery combine, a lot of this collection is online. I really recommend looking these up. So that's where an artist has had an idea of how to simulate surgery. So that's what an artist can do in the team. And then there's also performance. So I'm going to see what you think of this. Give me a thumbs down if it's a play.
So who are you supporting? I'm the surgeon registrar. Okay. Excellent. Let me tell you. Yeah, 31-year-old lady, stab wound to the abdomen at the moment. Right. About the abdomen? Right upper quadrant. Right. Okay. Just getting to that now. Can't you do the airway? Airway's patient. She's got marriage on both sides. We're waiting for SATs at the moment.
So that's a simulation. That's not real. And if you look at that image, you can see this is my friend Ali, and she's running it. She's a obstetrician, she's a consultant obstetrician, she's running her junior colleagues with a dummy about what they would do in a real situation. So performance is a big part of simulation. It's not just necessarily about making an image of something. You've got to take part in it. And another one of our insights more recently was that there is something similar in what it is to be a performer in theatre and in music, that it is to perform acts of surgery. So what I really mean by that is, when you saw those people and they were sort of pretending to be caring for a patient, that's what they were caring for, this person. This is so obviously not real, but they acted like it was real. They were acting, they were caring for this plastic body. They knew that we were watching them through the glass, but just like actors, they knew to perform. So there is something in here about when the doctors and we sort of run them through, imagine you were caring for this patient who's been stabbed, and this is the patient of the performance about it. So that's something we've sort of played with in recent years. And when I say play, ooh, I'm unstable. Am I back? When I say play, I really mean play, because there is a playfulness to the work we do, and we're interested in the idea of what it is to play with big serious topics and try and make them more alive through experimenting. So this I think is everyone's idea of the sort of it's performance, isn't it? It's a beautiful young person playing a violin in front of an audience. But you know what? This is a computer simulation too. So she's real, she's really playing, but in here, all these people are a simulation. So we've taken the idea of performance and we've made a performance simulator for performers. So this is at the Royal College of Music, and they've had, we work very closely at the Centre for Performance Science, although I can barely say the words. And what we do is we take simulation used, so we get medical students and doctors and performers to swap two different types of simulation. So we get the musicians to try out a surgical simulator, and we see what it feels like to perform in that environment. And we get our surgeons to sing, and we make them sing in front of this simulated audience. And the results have been absolutely fascinating. And one thing we discovered, the experience of trying out a new type of performance is actually really, really similar between the two. And there are a lot of similarities between performers who are musicians and surgeons, and personality-wise as well. So the last one, we're coming to the final lap. This is craft, and now this I could have talked to you for an hour about this, because this is my research and this is what I feel most strongly about. And this is my thank you slide. And you'll find that when you get to university and you're giving slides of your own research, you have to say big thank yous to the people that fund your research, otherwise they don't give you more money. So thank you to Imperial College, to the Institute of Philosophy and the Arts and Humanities Research Council, who more than anyone keep the show on the road project. So we found in a workshop that surgeons and people who carve in stone had a lot of similarities between how they used materials. That's me, that's a paper that we had in Nature, and that's Phil Theory, who is a magnificent monumental mason. And we were talking about what it's like to hammer into bone, and what it's like to hammer into stone, and what the experience is of doing the same thing. And we realised that actually for all these people, so that's me again, there's lots of slides of me looking concerned. Next to me is, there's me stood, there's Merlin. Merlin is an artist. We've got Paul and Zaid. Zaid, who's in the centre, what's Zaid doing? I've got me in the way. Zaid is holding a skull, and he is a children's head and neck cancer surgeon, and he's an extraordinary man. And next to him, the gentleman here, this is Paul, who's a carver. We all got together and we discussed what our experiences were of carving bone and carving stone. So what was it like for the two of us to do the same thing? And we found incredible similarities between what it's like to use these tools. So this is actually a surgical tool, and these are carving tools. down here. In fact, you can see that they're almost identical. This is us trying to explain to one another how to make a cut if you were going to break a jawbone. And Zaid, who's a surgeon, is trying to explain to Paul, the stone carver, the sculptor, how he would make that cut. And straight away, Paul just knows what that cut would look like. It's really extraordinary. There's a real sense of language that's shared between them. There's an embodied knowledge. They just know what it's like to hit something hard with a hammer. They know how hard you have to hit to get through and make the cut really, really cleanly. So there's a whole language that they share, and that's what in my work I'm really, really interested in. How do they know these things? They have an unwritten knowledge. So they know, they have a knowledge about the world that they can't write down in words. It's something that they can only explain through gesture. They have a really similar sensory experience. They make judgments about the world. They sense it, they smell it, they feel it, they touch it. And they also have a very strong sense in the workshop that things come in layers, just like we saw with Fleur, the body comes in layers. They all had a sense that bone and stone, if you're carving two types of stone, one on the other, they have to be in a particular orientation. So there's something about being a craftsperson that I personally think surgery is probably closer to craft than almost any other activity. I feel that really strongly. Now, a lot of people say to me, so what? What's the point? What does this tell us? And I think that's fine. And my argument, my response to that would be that it's really important that we know how people make judgments when they're operating. So this guy, the VR guy, he can't see anything else. He's not really getting true haptic feedback when he's hammering. He's just getting kind of like, you would do with a normal computer game. You're just getting buzzing feedback. What if in fact he's using the sound in real life when he hammers something to make a decision, but he doesn't get the sound? What if the guy who's doing the prostate examination, what if it's actually something else that he's sensing when he does that we're not simulating with the computer? Maybe the stuff that we're missing that we would gather through art or through craft or by asking people from different specialties. So why is it important? And for me, the most important one is point number 4. I've just explained why I think it's like craft. It explains to you why you need people in the room when you imagine the arc we talked about at the beginning. So in order to teach something, you have to know who you're teaching, what you want them to get at the end of it, what you want them to become, and how you're going to get there. The only way you can do that is to have a diversity of thought and experience. You have all sorts of people giving their opinion about what you should be doing. And you need imagination. The things I hope I've shown you are wildly imaginative. So if we go back and we do another poll, who would you put in your team? Who's in your team? So before, the scientists and the engineers were in the lead. If you were putting your team together now to simulate surgery, so you've seen the very scientific one, you've seen the VR one, you've seen, what else did we see? We saw the performance simulator, we saw art, we saw Fleur with the incredible textile body. Who would you put in there? And I think, there is a poll. I wasn't sure there would be a poll. Who are you going to put in your team first? And this is a question that we ask ourselves so often. Who's your first pick? And again, I've got one eye, I'm running a little over, I've got one eye on the clock. So I think we'll go to a minute. Craft sneaking out. Scientists, engineer, so I think these are so interesting. I love polls where no one can see you put your answer in, because you can genuinely say what you think. This is really interesting. We've got 20 seconds. Thank you very much. Loads of people are voting, and it makes it so much easier. And it's really nice to see responses, so I do appreciate that. We've got 10 seconds. Who's going to pull out? Okay. So it's funny. Now, maybe I led everyone. I don't know. Maybe I led everyone, but craft is, it's much more even though. Artists as well have come up in the answers. So it's there is no right or wrong answer. And I think if you were to ask a panel of doctors, they'd probably say scientists would be their first pick. I think, reflecting on it, I think it's a really difficult question, but it is the kind of question, thinking about, I said it myself, if you're teaching or you're giving a talk, you want to think about the people in the audience. I really tried to think about things I wish I'd known when I applied to medicine. And this is a lens, this is a way to think about all the different career paths, all the different things you do in medical practice, and a way to think about how if you do have an interest in art or craft, that actually there is something in there for you if you think you want to be a surgeon or do something practical. I think more than anything, it's thinking about simulation. Bringing you back to the last point is that it is essentially an act of imagination. And I think in any field in which you choose to study or you think you might like to work in the future, keeping that sense of play and imagination and creativity is probably what's going to help you through even the toughest times professionally. So I really hope that helps. I hope it was interesting. And above anything, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your new, fresh perspective on combining art and science. So now is our kind of question time. So please, would you, all of you watching, could you insert your questions into the Q&A? I've got a few questions of my own to ask now. So in terms of talking about combining art with science, in the news recently, in research, I've been researching this, and combining art and science is a big topic now. Because if you think about it, science and art are just ways that humans interpret the world around them. Although be it they do it in many different ways, many different methods, it is just our human way of trying to understand the world around us. So I would like to ask if you think there are any other ways in which art and science can come together apart from surgery. Any other ways you think? I've got a few examples to talk about later as well.
Thank you. That's a lovely one, and that's right up in one of my favourite sort of things to think about. And the art, science, humanities debate, huge in universities at the moment, and it's one of the oldest debates we have. You may have come across C.P. Snow in your readings and his Reed lecture. So there's the debate about how we carve up our ways of looking at the world. Are not new. I think the art question is really interesting, where arts and science meet, because one of the failures of thought that people have is they don't interrogate art enough in that. And I think art is sometimes used as a bit of a shorthand for things we can't explain or things that are difficult to quantify. So I think unpacking what we mean by bringing artistic practice or bringing art is really important. So that's a very, very long-winded way of saying almost everywhere. So how do we characterize art or artistic practice or the things we expect artists to do? We expect them to be original, creative, rule-breaking, transgressive, in some cases politically motivated. We expect them to have a different perspective on the world that you get from scientists. So I think bringing those sort of characteristics into your scientific practice is hugely important. You may find it interesting, the Wellcome Trust, and this is something that everyone might like to look up. The Wellcome Trust, who are one of the UK's biggest funders of scientific research, especially medical research, they published a sort of survey report in the beginning of this year called What Do Researchers Think About the Worlds They Work In? And 75% of them said that they felt that creativity in their workplace was damaged by our current research culture. So if we're taking the first step to say that art is creativity to an extent, how can we all live flourishing creative lives, would be my question. So that didn't answer your domain one, because I hope you're going to have some domain. So, you think, where do you think it is? Where do you think they meet?
So, thank you for your response. I have, in my research, I've found a couple of ways in which recently they've been linking together. As you were talking about, you mentioned Professor Roger Neborn, and I actually went to one of his talks there on Gresham College lectures. If any of you in the audience would like to go and research him, what he's doing is he's looking at keyhole surgery, similar to what Dr. Sam was talking about, where they have simulators which train the surgeons to do a keyhole surgery, and in the real operation, the surgeons will control the surgery from a remote computer. And this is what Professor Roger Nieborn was talking about. I think this is another way recently in how technology is combining with science and surgery. So yeah, thank you very much for that response. I think success now, she was having a few technical issues earlier, but if she's ready to ask a question.
Yes. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. That was really interesting. It was really captivating. I'm not even going to lie to you. I didn't expect this to cut. I was expecting to come and hear about medicine, but the way you brought it was like, wow, there's actually another aspect that I should look about. But there's one question in my mind right now. Is, you know how it's based on talking about art, talking about craft. Someone like me, maybe a student like me wants to be a surgeon in the future and not really may not even be good at art. Do you think that would be a problem, or it's just something that you just learn as you do it?
No, I think that's a great question, because I think most people have big concerns about what it is, what their personal qualities are, and I think art is, okay, so I stole this from Merlin, who is in that picture. Merlin explains, Merlin's an artist, but she's also an art teacher, and that's her main, that's how a big part of her working week. And she explained to me that art is looking. It's not, I always used to think it was about mark making. And she was like, well, when you start to be an artist, you spend most of your time learning to look and learning to observe. So I think if you're not artistic, you know what you can do? You can practice your skills of observation. So, if you're a bit sort of, you've got a bit of time on your hands, grab a pencil. And I do this now, I'm 40, I'm learning new things. And I just draw stuff and you just look really, really carefully. So I think there are ways in which, they're rubbish, they're awful. They don't look like the thing I'm trying to draw. But that looking, observation, thinking differently, you can do that all your life. And if what you want to be is you want to be a surgeon, there are so many ways to get there and so many different people who see the world differently. I have every confidence, I really do.
Okay, thank you very much again. I've got another question, and this is to do with sort of the future and where we're going with this. So many people believe that by making a simulation, you're taking away the real life experience behind it, the real life feelings and thoughts, because as you all are probably aware, going to a simulation, you are aware it's a simulation. Okay, this may happen in real life or not, and this may take away some of your feelings or actions that you may take. So I was thinking, in the future, do you think it is best to have everything 100% simulated, and also your kind of thoughts on just the future of this in general?
I didn't unmute myself, so that's really interesting. Thank you. The future is always much nicer to talk about than the past. That's why I'm not a historian. So I'm going to pick you up on one thing, and that's feeling. So feeling is a really interesting word, and it's a word I'm very interested in because it's got two meanings. So do we mean sensory experience, or do we mean emotional feeling? And my feeling would be we mean both. So when you're in a simulation, so I think what I picked up on from the question, I'm being a bit naughty because I'm sort of assuming that I knew where you were going with this. There's sensory experience. We know that you all the things that we talked about before, like, are you using your sense of sound? So when you hammer an implant into a thigh bone, you use your sense of sound to listen to how it's going in. So if you hit it too hard, the tone goes ding, 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 and it's about to shatter. So there's the sort of sensory experience bit that we could probably, with technical improvements, continue to make simulators that as closely replicate the sensory experience of being a surgeon. But feeling, in terms of your emotional response, see, this is one of the ones that really worries me. I don't know whether simulation, whether you always know it's a game, and whether people who are really good actors or performers or different types of people get into the simulation more easily. And if you've ever done theatre or improv, and you how there are some people who just get into it really quickly and they come out of it, and you know they're there. They're imagining they're this person. And then other people, they're really self-conscious and aware of themselves. You know, are we making life really, really difficult for people who can't make that jump? So those are my concerns about feeling. That's unpacking feeling. The future, I wouldn't want to be trained, I wouldn't want to be treated by someone who's only done simulated surgery or medicine. That's just me. And that might just be prejudice because I can't imagine it. I would be, because my worry is you may have come across the frame problem in AI, so like cognitive science, you think about the frame problem. So, you know, what is imaginable in this box and what's outside it? And my worry would be if you rely on simulation, there may be stuff you haven't thought of, Donald Rumsfeld, the unknown unknowns. What are the things you don't know? And if you can't imagine it, you can't simulate it. So those are my worries, concerns and thoughts. A great question.
No, yes, thank you very much. There was actually something I wanted to mention, was a book I was reading quite a while back, and it was about this university that relied solely on simulation, and the course was a weird one. It was one that was combining social sciences, I think, with a bit of politics as well. And what it did was put these students into, it gives them sleep drugs, and they would be unaware they were in the simulation. And that was kind of to eliminate the aspect of you knowing that you're in a simulation. So they found out that the students acted just normally, and it gave them good results. All the students who went to this university apparently did very well. So yeah, that was just a book I don't remember the name, unfortunately. But yeah,
that's quite like, I can see some questions in the chat, because that's that university. When you said university there, it made me look at some of the questions in the chat and kind of what are they, where are we going next? Who have we got questions? Have we got success next, or
yeah, I think next? Success will pick up next.
Awesome. Have we got success?
Yeah. Yes, we've got a couple of questions here. Yeah. Can you? Okay, sorry. So we have a lot of questions. The first one is, it says, do you think?
I'm listening. Pardon? I'm listening. I talk too much. I'm listening.
Okay. Okay. It says, do you think that art could be helpful to help explaining surgical procedures during to patients and families?
Yeah.
Can I say that again?
Yeah. There's a whole different talk I've given about so using art is really important, because some people, they really, really benefit from having stuff drawn for them. I think learning styles is a bit controversial. Lots of people have thoughts about that, but I think there are some people who are really visual. And it's a man who very sadly died. I'm looking back at his books on the shelf. He was a very amazing scholar called Gunter Kress at UCL. And he wrote loads about the visual grammar of design and about how you explain things using pictures. So I think talking to families, the other beauty of, if you've got a picture, you can give it to them. I love drawing diagrams. I love explaining what I'm doing, and you can give someone something to take away. So yeah, I think it's a really good idea.
Okay, thank you again. Elias would like to know, do you think simulations will one day replace hospital placements?
They're really popular at Imperial now. No, I think that bits of it will be replaced, but I think hospital placements aren't just when you're in your clinical years. And again, this is something to think about if you're applying for medicine. We always think, or people's outside intuitions is often that it's about learning how to take blood or do things. A huge amount of it is socialization. It's about making your professional identity. It's about meeting other doctors, working out who you are, what it's like to meet. I might meet 50 people a day. You know, I might meet 50 new people a day. Like, how do you manage those bits of professionalism and doing a really interactive job? So honestly, no. In brief, no.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Another question is from Sarah. She's asking, is there any possible risks with using stimulation and VR in surgery?
So I think that's a really good one. So how would I bundle up risk? So risk would be, you make the simulation factually wrong. I think that's unlikely, but it's possible. Risk would be if you imagine you only train on a simulator, what happens, and this is actually something that Roger Meebone talks about, and I think all his Gresham videos, I think they might be online, and his lectures are always free. That's one thing to bear. They're really good. So a point that Roger makes in a paper is that if you, so when you do keyhole surgery, so what a lot of the abdominal surgery using like long slender things through tiny holes, and so you look up on a computer screen, you do the operation. If something unexpected happens, you still have to go back to do an old-fashioned big open operation. So if the only way you know how to operate is using the very technologically advanced way of doing it, you don't know how to do an old-fashioned operation that, you know, my granny would recognize, then you're in trouble. So those would be my two. And then the whole thing about risk and confidence, you know, if you train on something where you know you can't really do harm, are you really training? You know, there's nothing like operating for the first time and you know, knowing just how important it is and just what a privilege it is. So those would be, so like the emotional side, the practicality side, those would be my two big concerns.
Okay, thank you very much again. I would like to take the questions into sort of a new, different turn. There are lots of aspiring medics here today listening, and I was wondering what drove you originally into choosing, first of all, surgery, and I guess right now, what motivated you to study arts combining with science?
Oh dear. Right, this is time for truth telling. So my mum's a teacher. My mum never invites me to go and talk to her pupils because she thinks I tell the truth too much on this. So truthfully, why did I do medicine? I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I liked people, and I knew those two things were important. And for me, I always wanted to have a job. And now I know that might sound really weird and pathetic, but I knew I had to do something stable where I knew what I was doing. And that's probably, I had two UCAS forms ready. I'd one to do classics because I did Latin and Greek as well, and then one to do medicine. And I went, medicine, because I panicked. I'm not proud of that. It's the best decision I ever made, but I wasn't one of those. So I tell that story because you don't have to know from when you're tiny that you definitely want to be a doctor. You can wobble this way, that way, and other ways. So I made my mind up really late. I wanted to be a neurologist, so I wanted to be a brain specialist, I wanted to be a clever doctor, and I ended up a surgeon, thumping things with hammers, because they were lovely and they were funny and people were in pain and you made them better. And there was like this immediate, you know, and trauma, people are just broken, you put them back together, and there's something fabulous about that. It is the most rewarding work. But then I started to realize that we could do things better, and I started to become more interested in, do you know what I mean by like science and meta science, you know, meta, the study of things around things. I just got more interested in like what people's motivations are and how we can do things better. And then I kind of drifted that way. So again, it's okay to change direction. You have to have a vague plan. It's got to be practical, but being your authentic self and bringing in all the things you love about the world and you're curious about and you're playful and you stretch your brain in a billion different ways can only be recommended. The truth. I can only tell the truth.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Another question here is, it says many students who want to study medicine have to abandon art subject. How best can they keep this connection with art alive?
That's really important. So I did plug my own thing. I did a program on Radio 4 and I got so many messages from medical students saying, I still want to do my art, how do I do it? And that was the best thing I got. So how can you, so I think it's back to what do we mean by artists? So if you have an artistic practice, like sculpture, drawing, dance, theatre, music, doing things, just do a little bit of it because it is a tough job. So I've made my academic hobbies my career in a weird way. You don't have to. You can be a creative person who, so there are, okay, in what ways can you combine this? There's medical humanities. So if you are a poet, a writer, you're interested in literature, there is a whole academic field dedicated to that. Increasingly art is in there, visual art. And there are people who now their entire career combines, especially psychiatry and general practice, and making beautiful things that are resonant and help their patients get through their illnesses. So there are practical ways. And then there's also just protecting yourself by just doing creative things. I know people who do amateur dramatics, and I'll tell you one thing, the amazing thing about medical school is you get there day one and everyone is extraordinary. Doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is, you think you're quite good at something, there will be someone there who, they're just really rounded. It's the joy of working at a medical school. You've got people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and our students are extraordinary, honestly. There are some ways.
Thank you, thank you. Another question we have here is, how long does it take to imagine and sort of develop these kind of, for example, the haptic prostate that you mentioned? Could you kind of give us an insight into the development behind those?
So that project was funded by the EU about 7 years ago, was the first idea for it. And to bring it through to testing, it's about 5 years. So that was Luke's PhD project, so that's 3.5 years. And then 2 guys are doing postdocs on it now of 2 years. So these are long. So the scientific ones are incredibly long because you need computer scientists, engineers. They're not doctors. The people who built that are not doctors. They're computer scientists and engineers with people with getting some clinical input. So they're long projects. Have I got a question from Success?
Yes, thank you so much. Another one says from Leah. I think it just went off. Wait 1 second. Can't find it anymore. Oh, okay. I can't find the question anymore. It says, this is from Benham. It says, why do you think art wasn't more integrated into medicine? What are the challenges?
I was at a whole conference about that about a week ago. Why is that? So the challenges are within the profession. So medical education, how long have I got? Not too long. Medical education goes in a pendulum like that. For the last 200 years in North America and Europe, it goes super scientific, it goes very artsy, and it kind of swings one way to the other. And we're in at the zenith of science in medicine. You think about what medicine was in eras gone by. When you don't know about the science, it's got to be an art. Now, there still is art in there, but we foreground scientific study because so much of what we do for patients is grounded in science. So if you train generations of doctors primarily in science, they will hire people and they will select people who are also scientists. Now, I'm not trying to say that science isn't important. Science is the absolute core of what I do. Orthopaedic surgery is applied engineering. It is pure science. But I think you will see that pendulum move a little bit. And as we have more medical humanities, as the profession understands that you can incorporate art and humanities into the academic study of medicine, and you have medical students coming through who've been exposed to people who make very serious scholarly additions to the literature in the arts and humanities about medicine, you will find more people who come along. So honestly, I think it's within the profession that we have all been trained for so long that what we do is primarily a science, and maybe we've forgotten that really what we do is we are in the business of human beings. So we might see that swing.
Okay, thank you again. I think we will have time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. So last one from me. Do you think there is, what do you think are the best ways of kind of incorporating this into med school, maybe the med school curriculum, or maybe taking more of an active change in forcing people to learn the kind of combinations between art and science?
So for me, it would be selection. So making sure you get as wide and varied and diverse group of people coming into medical school. So stop selecting people or stop the tendency to select people who are just like you. So widen that pool, make that as wide as humanly possible. Changes to the medical curriculum aren't really possible because the General Medical Council tell us how to put medical degrees together. So we're kind of quite locked in on that. But also just making breathing room, make it okay to leave training for a little bit, do different things. So just loosening up some of the expectations on people. I think they're not big, apart from selection, they're not structural changes, they're attitude changes. That's what I think. How are you doing? One more from, is it one last question?
Yes.
Brilliant.
I have a question, sorry. This is leaving this. I'm thinking about us trying to start this process with like trying to do medicine. Do you think, because it's a really long process, a really long year of study, so what's like your motivation? Like, did you just have the passion right from like maybe when you were a child to just make healthcare a better process, a better place, or it was just as you go along you found that, I don't know, what motivates you to keep going?
Motivation was the beginning motivation was definitely so my dad broke his wrist. He broke his scaphoid bone and the base of his thumb, and he did work with his hands. He didn't do office work, so he basically never worked again, and it was fixed really badly. So that it sounds so trite and it sounds so obvious, but I saw absolutely up close what happens in your life if something so tiny as a bone so small you can swallow doesn't heal. What the impact can be on every sphere of your life. And then the motivation is intrinsic, it's in you. You just want, once you're on that treadmill, you're off, you'll go. If you've got the motivation to get there, everything will carry you. And I think everyone's got it, and everything will be thrown at you. But I have every faith that people have it in them as long as it's brought out.
Yes, I think, thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Thank you really much. I really personally, I found this really interesting. I didn't hope to see it. I didn't think I'll be more interested in this, but I'm really interested in this. I want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone that even tuned in. Thank you for you, Sam. This is really good. I think you should do it. More people, even spread more words, so people actually see that, oh, it's also something that I could be interested at. Right now, it even makes me like more interested in doing it and increase my motivation for doing it as well. That is really rewarding as well. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. It was really nice. It was really interesting to have you all. Thank you so much. And this is the end of it. And I really, really, really appreciate everyone that joined today. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. I'll see you when I see you. Thank you.